Blood on Clark Street. The day Chicago turned into a war zone. Chicago, 1929. Back then, the city wasn't just cold winds and jazz clubs. Nah, Chicago was a battlefield. Every alley, every bar, every smoky backroom had gangsters making deals, carrying Tommy guns, and watching their backs 24/7. During Prohibition, alcohol was illegal, but everybody still wanted a drink. And where there's money, there's violence. At the top of the food chain sat Al Capone. Folks called him Scarface. Smooth suits, expensive cigars, stacks of cash, and a smile that could fool you for about 2 seconds before you realized this dude was dangerous. Capone practically ran Chicago's South Side like it was his own kingdom. Bootlegging, gambling, bribing cops. The guy had his hands in everything. But there was one problem. The North Side Gang. Led by George Bugs Moran, they hated Capone with a passion. These guys weren't just rivals. This was straight-up war. Shootings, hijackings, revenge hits. It never stopped. Chicago citizens got so used to gunfire that hearing bullets at night was almost normal. And then came Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1929, a freezing Thursday morning. On North Clark Street stood a plain-looking garage owned by the SMC Cartage Company. Nothing fancy, just brick walls, grease stains, and the smell of motor oil. But that morning, several members of Bugs Moran's crew gathered there for what they thought was a routine whiskey pickup. Big mistake. Around 10:30 a.m., witnesses saw a police car roll up outside the garage. Now, in Chicago during the gangster era, seeing cops wasn't unusual. Sometimes real cops showed up. Sometimes gangsters dressed like cops showed up. Nobody knew who to trust anymore. 4 men stepped out. 2 were dressed as police officers. The other 2 wore suits and long coats. Inside the garage were 7 men connected to Moran's gang. Thinking it was just another police raid, they didn't fight back. They lined up against the wall and raised their hands. That's when everything went straight to hell. The fake cops pulled out Thompson submachine guns, Tommy guns. And then, brrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr metal hurricane. Shell casings hit the concrete floor. Men screamed, stumbled, dropped instantly. The killers kept firing over and over, making sure nobody got back up. More than 70 rounds tore through the building in seconds. When the smoke cleared, blood covered the garage floor. Bodies were piled against the brick wall. One victim, Frank Gussenberg, was somehow still alive, barely. He had been shot over a dozen times. When real police arrived and asked who did it, he looked at them through the pane and muttered the gangster code everybody knew. "Ain't nobody shot me." Then he died. And Bugs Moran, he escaped by pure luck. As Moran approached the garage earlier that morning, he spotted what looked like a police car outside. Thinking it was an actual raid, he turned around and walked away before the shooting started. That one little decision saved his life. The massacre shocked America. Newspapers blasted the story coast to coast. Photos of the bloody garage hit front pages everywhere. Ordinary folks couldn't believe how brazen the gangs had become. This wasn't hidden mob violence anymore. This was war in broad daylight. Everybody immediately pointed fingers at Al Capone. Problem was, nobody could prove it. Capone had a rock-solid alibi. At the time of the murders, he was relaxing in Florida, far away from Chicago. Smart move. The police believed Capone ordered the hit, but they never had enough evidence to charge him. Still, people knew. This had Capone's fingerprints all over it. The massacre basically destroyed Bugs Moran's power. His gang never fully recovered after losing so many men in one shot. Meanwhile, Capone's reputation grew even bigger, but not in a good way. Before, some people viewed him like a flashy outlaw celebrity. After the massacre, the public started seeing him for what he really was: a ruthless killer. Ironically, the St. Valentine's Day massacre didn't send Capone to prison. Taxes did. A few years later, the federal government nailed him for tax evasion, and the king of Chicago's underworld finally went down. But the massacre? That became legendary. Even today, nearly a century later, it's still remembered as one of the most brutal gangland killings in American history. A moment when Chicago's gangster war spilled into the open and showed the entire country just how deadly organized crime had become.